Community. What a great job you do in social services for Miami and the state of Florida. We have learned the social services organizations in which you are a premier example provides significant opportunities to our community and has major economic development impacts. Without them, we would be in deep trouble here in Miami-Dade County and in South Florida and throughout the nation and in the state. And I think it's very important to point out that when Fred and Cheryl, what a great job the staff does, and Fred and Cheryl working with our team of putting together the data that it was needed for this and the information on the various programs and the various outcomes. And we want to be talking about the significant economic impacts of JCS now in terms of how we put together the data. So I was talking about the important work that JCS does and all the community of all of you volunteers and Fred and Cheryl and the whole staff in putting together with our team of economists and Verity Finchus, our manager of client services, is here with us too, putting together the important data on outcomes that you produce as a result of the funding by individuals and grants of JCS. And I was saying that social service organizations provide a significant contribution to economic development. Harvey with the United Way, JCS, and other organizations. But I have learned a lot about all your work and all you do, and it's just, it really pleases me to be able to be here today and explain some of the data. So we're talking about economics here now. When we talk about economic impacts, we're talking about the impacts that the activities, the expenditures, but also most importantly, the outcomes of the various programs of JCS provides to the community. So we're talking about the economic development side of JCS, and also how well they do in our community relative to impacts. For example, how do you impact employment? How do you impact household income in our community? And when we talk about employment, we're not talking about just the staff, which is important, of the JCS. We're talking about also all the volunteers, because the volunteers have imputed value in our community. I mean, you're volunteering, certainly you're not making a wage, but at the same time you're providing outcomes that are important to this community. So, and also the outcomes that come out, people that we place in employment, for example, the disabled, the elderly, the fact that we take care of them, all of this has an imputed value in our community, and it filters through the whole economy of Miami-Dade County and of the state of Florida. The first thing that we did is to be able to take a look and see, okay, what are some of the major impacts that you provide to the community? Both from the point of view, and you'll see it is a kind of a circle with the various impacts that you provide. Some of these impacts are what we economists call benefits to the whole community, what we call externality benefits, benefits that cannot be quantified. For example, improving the standard of living of our community, reducing the social services cost to taxpayers. Those things that are very beneficial to the community are called externality benefits. Then we also quantify the actual economic impacts. How many people you placed in employment, and what is the income stream of the people you place in employment who are unemployed, for example, by working and producing income and therefore spending in the economy, and indirectly, as they spend, they also support taxes in the economy, the sales tax. As you know, we tax everything in terms of the universe. So here in Florida, we don't have a state income tax, but we have a sales tax. So any activity of the previously unemployed now with income, that generates economic activity. We also empower our community. If you're going to be a top-class world city here in Miami-Dade, or a top-class world state like Florida, we need to empower those who need help. And otherwise, without the JCS, we will be in significant problems relative to the elderly who needs help in nursing homes, relative to the education of our youth at risk, and also relative to, like I said, employment placement. So all these factors, I think, are critical to our community that we include in the 35-page report. I don't know, Fred, if you want to make it available, obviously, to the board and everybody else.
It's going to be available on our website.
It will be available on the website. So it's a 35-page report, and I don't want to give you today, this morning, a case of economists, which is called MEGO. It's a disease, M-E-G-O, my eyes glaze over. I like breakfast in the morning because in breakfast you have had coffee and everybody's awake. You should see me trying to explain this in the cocktail hour. Makes it a little more difficult. So in other words, so let's talk about all these things that I just mentioned that we put together in terms of actual quantification of economic impacts. And you can see, and you will be, I'll be discussing it with you in a second. First is we took a look at all the outcomes that you produce through the expenditures, the funding of the donors, the grants, the foundations, and the volunteers that work in the various programs, together with the board. What are the outcomes relative to how many people you place in jobs, as I mentioned, in terms of allowing youth at risk to finish primary education, primary high school, and some of them even college too also. And also help with the elderly in need that requires services that otherwise the state would have to pay for, and therefore cost all of us taxpayers who are in the private sector. So those are the economic impacts. So I like to produce what the outcomes of those economic impacts are, and you'll see them now at this time. In the let's see, we got that there now. Yep. Okay, let's go with it. Technology. You know, I don't know about you all, but I have a new Volvo, and that car talks back to me. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of weird. You know, being a boomer, I kind of like go, what? It's a car on the left. It's like, what? Anyway, let's put the next slide, please. See, and this has shows, so each of them will have, see, this is a kind of overall, so if you can go one by one now. You can see the contributions to jobs and economic activity, like we talked about, of your outcomes, and the well-spent investment from your donors and that are critical. And you can see how important that is relative to a return on investment to the economy of Florida. The empowerment of the underserved, we talked about that also. You can see that there also. Reduce social services costs. You know, this is something that without the major social services organizations here, the cost to taxpayers would have been huge, and to all of us. So the kind of work you do as volunteers, as the board, the staff, in terms of helping those in need, it's critical to decrease the social services costs to our society. And I'm not talking about just taxpayers, I'm also talking about criminality, you know, police, all these other things that would be needed there with the JCS, we're reducing that significantly. So we measure those impacts. You have the development of an educated and skilled workforce is another major area. We cannot allow those who need help to be left behind. Otherwise, we create inequality of income, we create social ills in our society. So, and the state of Florida has a major strategy or goal to create an educated and skilled workforce, especially here in Miami-Dade County, where we're open to the rest of the world and competition from the rest of the world. So that's something that JCS does very well. And then the like supporting the economic development strategy that I mentioned, those are the kind of both on externality benefits as well as quantification of economic impact. So when you take your outcomes in education, in employment placement, in help for the elderly, and you look at the outcomes over time, how many people we place, how many people we help, and everything else, that has impacts that can be quantified in terms of the income stream of the population, for example, that has been served, or the reduction in social costs. And you will see now what are the summary of the impacts. Like I promised you, it would be 3 or 4 slides. I won't give you MEGO this morning. You have a lot of things to do. The next one, please. So these are the significant economic impacts that you produce with your volunteerism, with your donations, with your investment in our community. You support close to 7,000 jobs in our community. And you say, well, we're small, we don't do that. I say, yes, you do, because your outcomes generate activity and generate income for those that you place in employment or that finish high school or finish college because of your services. And you also reduce the social services costs to both the county as well as the state. So jobs supported is equivalency. What it means is that it's not only part-time jobs, but also full-time jobs, includes those that are volunteers. So as the spending of all your outcomes are filtered through the community over time, or those people who have been employed, for example, that spending generates other types of economic activity. And the retail grocer, for example, and the suppliers to the retail grocer or the store, all these other things. So in reality, you're a major economic development engine as a social service organization, supporting in the state of Florida over 7,000 jobs throughout the community, both full and part-time, including your volunteers. Because of the excellent outcomes that you produce and the efficiency in terms of expenditures that you produce, you also generate in the state, primarily in Dade County, over $240 million in household income. These are people who are now members of society, who have been placed, who have degrees, who before they wouldn't have. So the household income generated is also another important economic impact, and that's what you do with your activities at JCS. And the total economic impact on the state of Florida, again, primarily Dade County, is over $500 million. So that, and that's all the methodology that is accepted professionally, that government uses, the private sector uses that methodology called input-output methodology to be able to determine these very important impacts from your outcomes. Now, the most interesting thing is, then, okay, you do all that and that's your impact. Next slide, please. But if you are a donor and you're investing in JCS, we look at the economic impact, economic development impact of JCS, like I mentioned, and you said, okay, what is the social return on that investment of that donor, that individual, that foundation, that grant that is being provided? Through highly efficient operations, because what we found is that you're highly efficient, JCS, in terms of turning each dollar donated into significant economic impact. You can see that here, that through highly efficient operations, for each dollar in donations to the Jewish Community Services, its programs and services generate, so every dollar that you give, $15 in household income, over $15, $21 in GDP, which is total production in the economy, and over $32 in total economic impact. To me, that's a pretty good rate of return of your dollar invested. Extremely good rate of return on your dollar invested. And then the whole community, in terms of all the benefits, your expenditures receives economic benefits because you spend money to do these outcomes. Those expenditures, in terms of benefits, are 16 times. So for 16 times the expenditure. So that is a major economic impact of JCS that we have found through actual research, looking at actual data, looking at actual income outcomes, looking at actual expenditures in terms of the investors that are in JCS. And I told Fred that you and the team and the board should be extremely proud, and the volunteers, of the work you do in our community, because those are real outcomes related to investment in the organization. So let me just finalize by saying, the next slide, please. And this is really the main conclusion that we should take from all of this. That through highly efficient operations and low operating budget, so I was amazed about the low operating budget in relation to the outcomes and the economic development impacts that JCS produces. Through partnerships and funding agencies, so generated this operating expense budget through partnerships with funding agencies, community organizations like the United Way and others, and local leaders. JCS is improving the quality of lives and generating significant social and economic impacts through successful program outcomes. So that's what we came out after a 3 to 4 month study working with JCS. Thank you.